Have you ever really stopped to think about how you think? I mean, the way you build an argument, or what you believe about justice, or even just your search for a good life. So much of that stuff can be traced back to just three guys. Three incredible minds from ancient Athens, more than 2,000 years ago. So today, let's dive in and meet the philosophical titans who basically built the foundation for Western thought: Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle.
I mean, it's a pretty wild question, right? How could a few men from 2,400 years ago have anything to do with how you think today? But seriously, their influence is everywhere. Think about it. A scientist testing a hypothesis, a lawyer building a case, even you just trying to be a better person. You're literally using the tools they created. Their ideas aren't just some dusty old history lesson. Nope. They're more like the invisible operating system running in the background of our entire modern world.
And what makes this whole story so incredible, what really makes it powerful, is that it's a direct lineage. You've got Socrates, this kind of wandering street corner philosopher who teaches the wealthy and aristocratic Plato. Then Plato goes on to found a famous school where he teaches the absolute genius Aristotle. It's like this amazing intellectual relay race where the baton of wisdom gets passed down, challenged, and made even stronger from one generation to the next. Just incredible. All right, so let's start with a man who completely changed the game, Socrates. See, before him, most philosophers were obsessed with the big external stuff, the stars, what the universe is made of. But Socrates, he did a total 180. He turned that focus inward. He wasn't looking at the cosmos, he was looking at us. He was interested in our morality, what we know, and what it means to be human. And this one single phrase pretty much sums up his entire philosophy. For Socrates, wisdom wasn't something you just get. It wasn't a destination. No, it was the process of constantly looking at yourself, questioning yourself. He was famous for saying that true wisdom begins the moment you admit you know nothing. It's only from that starting point, he thought, that you can even begin to ask the right questions. So how did he actually do this? Well, he had this legendary tool, something we now call the Socratic method. And here's the key. It wasn't about him standing on a box and lecturing people. Not at all. It was all about conversation. He just asked questions. One after another after another. And the goal wasn't to make someone look stupid or to trap them. It was actually to help them see for themselves the little cracks and contradictions in their own beliefs. And here's how it worked in practice. He'd start with a big, simple-sounding question, something like, "So what is courage?" And someone would pipe up with a really confident answer. But then Socrates would gently present a scenario where that definition just doesn't work. It completely falls apart. And that forces the person to stop, rethink, and come up with a better answer. You see what's happening? It's like he's a sculptor, systematically chipping away all the bits of ignorance to reveal something much more solid and true underneath. Now, this relentless questioning had a huge impact on Socrates' star student, a guy named Plato. And after Socrates was executed, a tragedy that really shaped Plato's thinking, he took this quest for perfect truth, perfect justice, perfect courage, and he asked this really radical question. He said, okay, if these perfect ideas don't seem to exist here in our flawed, messy world, then where do they exist? And his answer was totally groundbreaking. It's called the theory of forms. Basically, Plato argued that there are two realities existing at the same time. First, you've got the physical world we see and touch, right? The one that's always changing and is full of imperfections. But then, he said, beyond that, there's this whole other realm, an eternal, unchanging world of perfect forms or ideas. So like every single chair you've ever seen is just a flawed, imperfect copy of the one perfect capital C chair that exists in that other world. Okay, I know what you're thinking. That sounds pretty abstract, right? And Plato knew that. He was a master storyteller. So to help us get it, he came up with one of the most powerful and famous stories in the history of philosophy, the allegory of the cave. So here's the setup. He wants you to picture this. There are these prisoners who've been chained up inside a dark cave since the moment they were born. They're forced to face a flat stone wall, and they can't turn their heads. Now behind them, there's a fire burning, and people are walking past the fire holding up objects which cast shadows onto the wall in front of the prisoners. And since these shadows are the only thing the prisoners have ever seen, they believe the shadows are real. That's their entire reality. But then, Plato asks, what happens if one of those prisoners is suddenly set free and is forced to leave the cave and go outside into the real world? Well, at first, it would be awful. The sunlight, which for Plato represents the truth and real knowledge, would be blindingly bright and actually painful.
The prisoner would be totally confused, scared, and he'd probably want to run right back into the dark cave where everything was simple and familiar. But if he stuck it out, his eyes would slowly adjust, and then for the very first time, he would see the real world. And that difficult, painful journey, for Plato, that's exactly what education is. It's the philosopher's path from the darkness of ignorance into the light of enlightenment. And that brings us to our third and final titan, Plato's own star student, Aristotle. Now, if Plato's philosophy was all about reaching for the stars, for this unseen, perfect world, well, Aristotle brought philosophy crashing right back down to earth. He wasn't as interested in some other reality. He was a practical guy, fascinated by the tangible world right here in front of us. For Aristotle, the most important question of all was a really practical one. How do we live a good, happy life? And his answer is something we call virtue ethics. He said the ultimate goal for any person is happiness. But he didn't mean, just feeling good for a moment. He meant a deeper kind of fulfillment, something you achieve by building a virtuous character. And you don't just decide to be virtuous. You have to develop it through choice, through practice, through habit. It's something you work on every single day. And his big idea for how to do this is called the golden mean. It's actually a pretty simple concept. Aristotle believed that every virtue is just the perfect balance point right in the middle of two extremes. So take courage, for example. On one end, you have the deficiency, which is cowardice. On the other end, you have the excess, which is being totally reckless. Courage, the virtue, is that golden mean right in the middle. It's about finding that rational sweet spot in everything you do. But Aristotle's practical mind didn't stop with just ethics. This guy was obsessed with everything. He wanted to understand and categorize the entire world. And to do that, he realized we needed a tool, a clear, reliable system for thinking straight. So what did he do? He basically invented the entire field of formal logic. He came up with these fundamental laws of thought that any good argument has to follow. They sound super simple, but they're incredibly powerful. Things like the law of identity. A tree is a tree. It can't be anything else. Or the law of non-contradiction. A statement can't be both true and false at the very same time. These basic rules, they are the absolute bedrock of all rational thought. Everything from computer programming to how a court case is argued today is built on this foundation. So, okay, let's just step back for a second and look at this journey. It's truly incredible. You start with Socrates, who taught us to question everything. Then you get Plato, who pointed us toward a world of perfect ideals. And finally, Aristotle, who gave us the tools to systematically analyze the world right in front of us. This single lineage, these three minds, literally set the entire course for the next 2,000 years of Western thought. And the connections to our world today are just so clear when you look at it like this. The Socratic method, that's the engine of critical thinking, which we need now more than ever to get through all the noise and misinformation out there. Plato's search for perfect forms, that's what inspires us to fight for ideals like justice or to create beautiful art. And Aristotle's logic and his focus on virtue, that's the blueprint for how we have rational debates and how we try to build a good character for ourselves. Which, of course, brings it all right back to you. The next time you're struggling to find that healthy work-life balance, well, you're channeling Aristotle's golden mean. The next time you keep asking why to get to the real root of a problem, guess what? That's pure Socrates. You see, their legacy isn't trapped in some old, dusty books. It is alive and kicking right now in the very way you think, the way you question, and the way you try to make sense of your world.